Now, the Prime Minister has hinted at ripping up the UK's international obligations to get Rwanda flights off the ground and stop the boats. Speaking to the Sun newspaper, Sunak said controlling illegal migration is more important than a membership of any foreign court, but he did sidestep a question on whether he would pledge to leave the ECHR in the Conservatives' election manifesto. Well, joining me now to speak more on this is the ECHR of that topic, is the international human rights lawyer David Haigh. Great fan of you, David, and you know certainly a load about this. David, we've had this conversation, it seems, endlessly. Groundhog Day, it feels like Rishi Sunak rattling his sabre. The big question is, David, do you think the Prime Minister even has the political appetite to do this?
Good afternoon, Martin. I think you've got an increasingly desperate Rishi Sunak here, and if he genuinely thinks that he will be the Prime Minister and take us out of the ECHR, he's not just desperate; he's delusional. Even if you look at the process to come out of the ECHR in terms of time left, there isn't that. We don't have that time. We need, for example, one of the ways is a 6 months notice period. Even if we gave that now, there's going to be an election probably before that. And there's certainly no ability for him to do that in his party at the moment. So again, it's not delusion, it's purely trying to get votes. And as a human rights lawyer, I'm not worried that he will be bringing us out of the ECHR anytime soon.
OK, and David, I just want to read out a comment from a viewer which sums it up, and it will segue into a question for you to answer. Sue says this: other countries in Europe, for example, Italy and France, well, they don't take any notice of the ECHR if they decide to expel asylum seekers. Why should we? And David, doesn't that cut to the nub of this? The political will to defy the ECHR, to defy Strasbourg, if you like, is already there. We don't need to leave the ECHR. We just don't need to have the guts to stand up to them.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Now, I obviously, as a human rights lawyer, don't want to leave the ECHR, but we have in the past ignored rulings, and we can do that in the future. Now, it's not obviously a thing that, as a lawyer, you want to suggest that people ignore laws and break them. That's not something that should be doing. But you're quite right. I think there should be, if Sunak had a strong party, and it's more of a political point really than a legal one, he can do that. Other European countries are all done it in the past, but I think that would fracture an already very fractured Conservative Party. And this, I think, is nothing more than a vote play. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not possible to leave the ECHR before the next general election, just in terms of existing laws.
So David, just to clarify, it is great. So there isn't time to do it anyway. We don't actually need to do it anyway. And so what is all of this? Do you think it's just electioneering, it's posturing, it's tough talking of somebody who seems to be running out of ideas?
Absolutely. I've said it months ago. He's creating the monster under the bed to scare people, I think, to weaponize the bogeyman of the ECHR. Kind of for want of a better description, a kind of a Poundland version of Boris's Get Brexit Done. He's desperate for anything that will give people a reason to vote for Sunak and not vote for Starmer. And I think this is just hopeless.
And David, another point, if it were to proceed towards some sort of withdrawal from the ECHR, a referendum, whatever that may be, you'd expect the legal institution, the judges, the judiciary, the courts, the barristers, the charities, the entire machine, as we saw with Brexit, would surely launch into overdrive to stop this thing even happening anyway.
Well, absolutely. And if they use the process that's there by giving 6 months notice, that's a quagmire of chaos, effectively, because then what that doesn't stop previous things that breached the ECHR when we were a member from suddenly being able. So they'd have to re-legislate things. So it's just more and more mess, more and more chaos, and it just won't happen. And the Prime Minister must know that.
OK, so David, I want to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it is that we're ever going to leave the ECHR anytime soon?
0. Anytime soon. I don't see it happening. I don't see the Conservative Party getting back in with a sufficient majority, if they get a majority or someone does, to bring us out. And even if they did, it's going to take a long time. There'll be, aside from the actual legislation point of that, there will be legal battles. And even if that did happen, it doesn't immediately solve the problem that we've got of people coming across the channel. So that none of those things are workable, and it's rather than waste time and money on that, let's actually look at things like processing and do things that could affect and have a positive impact on the problem we've got with illegal migration, rather than doing essentially this to win votes.
And David, finally, if the Labour Party were to get into power and all the polls are suggesting a bigger landslide, we're going to need to redefine the word landslide by the looks of it, bigger than 1997, the Labour Party will have absolutely no appetite whatsoever, will they, to take us out of the ECHR? So this moment will be completely past.
Absolutely, and if polls are to be believed, and that's a big if, then you're going to have a Labour government, perhaps, with a very strong majority for a long time, and it's not on their radar to bring us out of the ECHR. Now, as a human rights lawyer, and I've said before, I do think we need to start looking at reforming certain definitions of human rights. But again, I don't see that something that the Labour Party will be doing either.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us. That's human rights lawyer David Haigh. Always an absolute pleasure to have you on Straight Talking. Great stuff.